The government will hold an emergency meeting to discuss the threat of terrorism linked to the Israel-Hamas conflict.
Mark Rowley, he's the Commissioner of the Met, warns that the events in the Middle East are having a serious knock-on effect in Britain, where 5 people were charged at the weekend at a pro-Palestinian protest. Well, Chris Blackhurst joins us now in the studio. He is the former editor for The Independent. He and I go back too many years. Long time, Chris. Donkey's years, as my father would say. We want to talk to you about your book, which is causing quite a lot of stir, a big stir in the world of football. But first, I want to talk to you about what's happening politically. This is turning into a real problem for Sir Keir Starmer, what's happening in the Middle East, because they've decided so far not to discipline any front benches who are not backing the line of who are calling for an immediate ceasefire. But I'm told that there's lots of people in his shadow cabinet now who do not agree with Starmer's position.
That's absolutely right. I mean, I think, I was told 13.
Right.
13 members of his shadow team don't agree with his position. You have to remember, I mean, it's only where are we now? It was only in 2018 that the Labour conference was full of Palestine flags.
Remember?
Those people have not gone
That's
away.
right.
Jeremy Corbyn is no longer leader.
Yeah.
In that sense, he's gone away. But those people haven't.
Yeah.
There's an underlying support for the Palestinian cause within Labour. And for Starmer, this is a huge, huge problem. I mean, it's akin to, well, we can go back to those days. It's akin to John Major and the beginnings of the whole Brexit thing, where he had this rump of the Tory party who were refusing to bow to his policy.
Yeah, over things like the Maastricht Treaty, and of course he was famous, John Major, wasn't he? The camera was running, the mics were running, when he referred to some members of his cabinet as people who didn't know the name of their father. I'm not going to use the B word on national television, but he did, and we all remember it. It was Michael Howard, who was the other two? Michael Portillo, and one other, whose name escapes me.
I'm going to say John Redwood, Bill Cash.
Bill Cash, yeah. So, and that the issue of Europe bedeviled the Tory party for the best part of 15 years, till Cameron got the referendum and it came up with the answer he didn't expect. Yeah,
well, he's in exactly the same problem. His big problem is that he is desperate for the Labour Party not to be seen to be anti-Semitic. And that was a slur that stuck. I mean, there was some evidence for it, but it really stuck. So he's now gone
under Corbyn in particular, you mean?
Under Corbyn. He's now gone the other way. He doesn't want anti-Semitism at any price. But, of course, there is a price, which is he's seen to be supporting Israel. And that's riling a huge element in his party. And those people, I mean, they're all his... Look, I would guess that a lot of those people on the marches and things are natural Labour voters. So he's got to be very careful. How he controls it, I don't know.
If he changes his position and says, OK, I'm going to back a ceasefire, he'll be accused by the Tories of the most egregious U-turn so far. And he's already vulnerable to that criticism, isn't he, Chris, that he keeps U-turning on major issues?
He already has on the siege.
Yeah.
He told one media outlet that he backed Israel's decision to blockade Gaza. And then to another media outlet, he said, I didn't say that. So he's already flip-flopping a bit on this. It's extremely difficult for him, isn't it?
Yeah, it is difficult. This is a horrible thing to say, really. What he's got to hope for, I guess, is that this goes on a long time, and there are, sadly, lots of civilians caught up in it, as there are already, but even worse, and demands around the world for ceasefire intensify. Now, I suppose if that happens, he could really attach himself. I mean, there may be a point where even the Conservatives have... I mean, Biden is warning Netanyahu a lot of the time, be careful.
Yeah.
Now, if something... if it really gets a lot worse, and it probably will, then it's possible he can attach himself to that and say, look, we need a ceasefire. But right now, he's in a very, very difficult place.
And Israel will argue, how can we possibly just concentrate our military operation on Hamas when Hamas, we know, use their own people as human shields? Yeah.
Israel has every right to eradicate Hamas. Hamas makes no bones about it. It wants to get rid of Israel. It's not an organisation that negotiates. I mean, that's clear. It does not. Might negotiate over hostages, but generally it's not. It has one ideology, and the ideology is to get rid of Israel. That's it. And Therefore, there is no compromise. They have to get rid of them. They're embedded in Gaza. They're among civilians. They're even next to hospitals and things like that. So it's extremely, extremely difficult. Where it ends.
Yeah. Just before we go on to your book, Chris, what about the terror threat here? I mean, I was talking earlier about, we saw a lot of people at the march at the weekend. They're entitled to march in terms of course they are, but should they be behind masks? Should they be hiding behind masks?
It's a very good point. I mean, look, I'm old enough, unfortunately, to remember when people marched in support of the IRA.
Yeah.
IRA was a proscribed organisation and people marched in favour of it and sang songs in favour of it. And there weren't many arrests. I mean, there'd be 5 arrests on Saturday. Well, actually, if the figures are correct, there were 100,000 people there. There's not many.
No.
The police are in a very, very difficult place because if they're not careful, it will all kick off and they'll become the targets. So they're standing back. They don't want their officers injured. And it could really, really turn very nasty.
They are very much standing back. I walked through Parliament Square on Saturday. I was at another event. Walked through the police. There were people clambering on traffic lights and letting off those smoke things, and the police just stand and watch. Now that's a decision.
Well, it's an extreme look. It's a very polarised argument. But if you sing, there's a song they sing. From the river to the sea.
Which is eliminating Israel in the process.
Yeah, but it's a song that the Palestinians and their supporters sing.
Some would deny that.
Yeah. Somewhere, I think it's called the Shahad, which is the black and white cloth.
Yeah.
Those are pro-Palestinian symbols. And then, of course, you've got the other people who have got paragliders stuck on their backs and all sorts.
Horrible.
How you deal with that, I don't know. I mean, there is talk that the government's going to review, Suella Braverman's going to review, might be a new offence called implied support for terrorism. But this is now.
Yeah.
And you and I know, but we all three of us know how long it takes something to get to the statute book.
Months.
I mean, well, months, years.
But there'll be another government in power by
years. And of course, it'll wend its way through the Commons. There'll be rows galore. I haven't even mentioned the Lords.
Yeah.
So, implied support for terrorism, well, good luck with that.
Now, very difficult with balancing it with freedoms.
Now, I know nothing about football, Chris, but I do know that Manchester United are one of the most, if not the most famous football clubs in the world, and they have been run by a pretty unpopular load of Americans called the Glazer family. You've written this book, the world's biggest catastrophe. And there's your 13-amp plug here. Manchester United, the Glazers, and the struggle for football soul. They took it. They took a stake, about 2003, $5 million. 2 years later, they've got 98% of Man U by effectively borrowing against Man United's assets. So this world-famous football club now is in huge debt.
Yeah, that's why I wrote the book. I was fascinated. Look, I'm not a Manchester United fan. I do watch football, but I'm not a Manchester United fan. But what I'm interested in, and always have been, are people who, how can I put this? People who come from nowhere and do incredible things. That's not to laud praise on them. That's really the fact that they came from nowhere. No one in this country had ever heard of them. They're barely known in America. And yet they bought the world's biggest football club. They're the biggest on TikTok, social media, huge fan base, all the legends, Bobby Charlton, George Best, the Munich crash, everything that goes with Manchester United. These characters bought it. And what's incredible about them is that, we've just talked about protests, but, the level of protests and abuse that they've sustained, it hasn't budged them at all.
No.
18 years they've owned the club and they're still there and they're not bothered. They've got the thickest skins on the planet. Quite incredible. And the club, the fans, even yesterday, they were playing, Manchester United were playing City, the local derby. City won very easily. The fans are in uproar, and so it goes on. And it's fascinating, and it's an amazing story about them.
Yeah, they've not broken any law, but they behave, charlatans. What the fans would say, they're charlatans.
Yeah, the key thing for the fans is that, and it is a cliche, I'm afraid, but as far as the fans are concerned, they don't show the love.
Right.
And they don't show the love. They don't turn up at Old Trafford. They're not among the fans. They're distant. They're over in America. and the club is saddled with huge debts. Old Trafford needs repairing, the training ground's falling behind. And don't forget, Manchester United supporters, they don't compare themselves against Rochdale or Basildon. They compare themselves against Bayern Munich and Real Madrid. And Barcelona. They've got fantastic stadiums. They've got the world's best players.
Yeah.
So they're looking at their team thinking, well, why haven't we got that?
But why are so many football clubs now in Britain, Premier League clubs, owned by foreign people who know nothing about football?
They've got money.
Very simple. It's quite right. It's money. It's filthy lucre. The TV rights are huge. And don't forget, let's look at, cut to the chase. The Glazers borrowed money to buy the club. They put in about £200 million of their own money, and even that, as I say in the book, was almost certainly borrowed as well. They paid overall 600 or so for the club. They've turned down offers recently approaching £6 billion.
Good Lord.
So £6 billion is what this club is worth. This is not, I mean, it is 11 men, or 11 women if it's the women's team. 11 men, 11 women, chasing a ball around the pitch. That's what football is.
It's ridiculous. That's what football is, Chris.
Even you played football at school and you chased the football around the pitch.
If I'd only known, I could have been in a £6 billion industry.
£6 billion.
I once competed in the Middlesex Championships.
Oh, there you go.
I think it was five-a-side.
Chris, it sounds a great book. And just finally, Jim Ratcliffe, isn't he Britain's richest man trying to buy the club?
Yeah, he is. But the problem with Jim is that I don't think he's really got enough money to spend. Plus, I think very quickly the Glazers want to hang on to it.
Right. Trophy assets.
There's that old saying they use in the city, when it's gone, it's gone. They don't like, if you sell something, you can't get it back. And they enjoy owning it. And if they can somehow marry the two worlds, get some money from somebody and still have a big share in it, then they'll
Fascinating. People should just support my local football team, Swindon Town. I don't think it's worth £600.
Can you tell this was written by a journalist?
Why?
I don't know. Is there special type of writing when a journalist writes a book like this? Investigation.
Chris, before he was over the Independent, was one of the best investigative journalists
in
Britain.
Yes, that's why I'm asking.
He is
Yes.
investigative
Stories
journalist
galore in here.
par
Found out
excellence.
secrets.
The stories galore.
Oh, there'll be secrets in there.
Stories galore. Roll up.
I'm waiting for the writ from the Glazer brothers, because you're bound to have upset it. And if you haven't, why not? That's Chris.